An aspect of the zombie game mode that plays a big part in how fun certain maps are to play is one that many players don't know of. It's an element to nearly every map from Black Ops 1 onward, and to some, it can be a little difficult to quantify. What I'm referring to is flow. Now, what is flow? Every zombies map has it, whether it's good or bad. It's one of the biggest deciding factors on if I enjoy a map or not, but it's not the only thing. Flow in and of itself is in actuality a two-pronged system, which consists of map flow and game flow. Map flow is how the player traverses the map either by running through areas, using fast travels, or overlapping paths. Game flow is how the zombies traverse the map and how they intersect and engage the player, and also how the player or players react to them. Now this may seem a bit wordy, but the best way to explain such a seemingly nebulous concept like this is with examples. First, let's show an example of a simple map flow, then work our way to more complicated systems. Nacht, being the first map, has one of the simplest flows that exist. With map flow, there are two different options: to keep the help door closed and train in the spawn, or to keep the Ascend from Darkness couch closed and camp upstairs. The movement for camping is quite simple. Once a round ends, the player will need to quickly traverse downstairs to the box or wall by to purchase ammo or get a new weapon. The traveling away from and back to the camping spot is just enough time before the next round zombies begin entering the map proper. This is the simplistic map flow of Nacht. The map is small and the layout is simple to traverse. Now the game flow is also one of the easiest to understand how it works. Not necessarily the easiest to master, but knowing the pathing of zombies is what leads to the strategies we players come up with. All of the zombies only enter through rebuildable barriers on Nacht, so knowing where they spawn from is simple. For more casual players, it's about gaining up their arsenal to funnel zombies through the narrow upstairs doorway into a straight line for collateral damage. For more advanced players, it's about getting all the zombies to spawn in and training them into a horde and spawn. This is the flow of Nacht. It is simple to learn, but due to the lack of perks and the close quarters nature of the map, it's difficult to master. Easy to know, hard to do. Now let's discuss the more complex modern formula. Let's see an example of bad flow. Now in modern maps, flow has a lot more aspects to it, not just player movement. TranZit is one of the biggest maps ever made, and its poor flow contributes to it being regarded so badly. Due to the large nature of TranZit, the map flow suffers. The main mode of transportation the developers created isn't by walking or running like any other map. TranZit uses the bus, which is an often tedious mechanic where you are either waiting for it to move while you're on it or waiting for it to show up when you're not. As the bus's circular path around the map never changes, it leads to the player being forced to follow the bus's schedule instead of their own. This essentially forces the player to forego this mode of transportation to get anywhere they want to go. But avoiding the tediousness of the bus makes you deal with the frustration of having to run across the massive map on foot. Running from location to location is massively time consuming and can take almost a minute to get from one location to the other. This is due in large part to the denizens, which were created to stop the player from full unrestricted movement in the fog, as without them, the map would lose any sense of challenge from the zombies, because of how gigantic the open areas of the fog are. But the problem is while the denizens are irritating to deal with, they are an unfortunate necessity to the fast travels on the map. All of the before listed things hurt TranZit's map flow, but the teleporting system kills it. These teleporters are completely random, and there are 7 of them scattered all over the map. And with how long it takes to set up one using the denizens, the big problem arises. One of zombies' biggest strengths is the fun you can have with friends. But if a player goes down on the map at a different location, it is almost impossible to get to that player and revive them. The map is too large to run, the bus is either too slow or never around, and the teleporters never send you to where you want. This is the perfect example of how a big map can have bad map flow. With game flow, because of how relentless the denizens are, it's a constant battle to stay within the confines of the locations to avoid dealing with them. The zombies often spawn in the fog just outside of the area you're in, and because you can teleport around, they despawn. This leads to the action always being close to the player despite the size of the map. So while the game flow of the zombies is alright, the map flow is terrible. But just because TranZit failed to have good flow doesn't mean that other big maps can't succeed at that. One of the many reasons why I love Attack of the Radioactive Things so much is because of its flow. Attack is a very large map, much like TranZit, though not that big. The map flow at first seems a bit much. Traversing it for the first time, going about, opening up the map, and turning on the power. But it's when the power is turned on is where we can see the concepts of TranZit's teleporting system realized properly here. Attack is one big circle with a line that cuts through the center where the beach is. A very similar layout to TranZit. However, in each of the four corners of the map, there exists a teleporter pad. When linked, these will always send you to a fixed location near the next teleporter going clockwise. Meaning, if I'm near Jug and someone is down by double tap on the opposite side of the map, I simply take the teleporter in my area, then hop into the one in the next area I'm sent to until I arrive at my teammate. Because these teleporters operate instantaneously, if I need to get to a downed player, or heck, if I just wanted to get to the other side of the map, I can be there in under 15 seconds. This right here is how you make a large map have a simple and good map flow. How you traverse the map matters so much, and Attack does that expertly despite being so large. In addition, the pathways that lead to each area are open enough for the player to not be cut off or blindsided by spawning zombies ahead of them. And because all of the four main corners, as well as the center beach area, are so open, the game flow in training or even camping against the zombies works so well. Just because a map is big doesn't mean it has to be a hassle to navigate or play on. But there are maps with more interesting types of layouts, ones that are multi-layered, where there's a level where the player starts at and then they can go down one or even two levels. Let's take a look at two examples of how the flow of a multi-layered map can be either ruined or saved by the implementation of a fast travel. There are many maps that don't adhere to the traditional structure of a sprawling arena type layout. Some maps go for a more vertical system where there's a main level and a second or even third floor below where the player begins. 9 from Black Ops 4 is an example of this type of map. As while the layout itself might be easy to learn, that doesn't always translate to having a good map flow. The map has one open, large training area where the player will spend the majority of the match. This is the spawn. It provides the biggest area for training, however, due to the nature of it, it's not easy to navigate. For the majority of the game, fire is spewing out from the floor constantly, making it more difficult to not get hit. The issue comes when the player needs to use the shield to protect themselves from hits that the fire directs them towards. Here is where the map flow falls apart. When the player needs to repair or rebuy their shield, because the workbench is situated on the very bottom of the map, in a corner of a tight room with very narrow paths leading to it, both the map flow and game flow suffer because of this one element. There are no fast travels on this map. Not when the underground is open, not when all the perks are bought, and not when Pack-a-Punch is activated. Having a map with multiple floors with no quick way to get down to the other levels can be an absolute nightmare when having to traverse the map. The tediousness of having to run all the way back and forth to get your shield is bad enough. But because of this, the game flow is also ruined, as the zombies will spawn ahead of you where you're going up and down the stairs. So even though the map has a basic looking layout, its lack of fast travels, shield location, and the spawn system absolutely ruins it. This is an example of a map with a vertical layout having bad flow, but there's an excellent inverse of this. Now, I don't normally do this, but it's time to say something positive about a Cold War map. D Machine has another vertical style layout, as with the main level the player spawns in, and then the bunker which takes up the lower half of the map. However, unlike 9, once the Pack-a-Punch is acquired and the Dark Ether is entered, not just one, but multiple fast travels become available. The most notable one being at the bottom level of Nacht, as like 9, the Nacht building is where the player will spend the majority of their game on high rounds. And when the player's armor is low or they need to pack a gun, they can just drop down and quickly take the fast travel right to the pack room, where the armor station resides, as needing to repair armor is similar to the shield. The player can also easily take the teleporter back up to the top layer as well. This is how you make a multi-layered map work. Give a fast travel in the dead center for the player to use to get back and forth. With this, the map flow works fantastic, and because the zombies will despawn to the area you move to and not spawn ahead of you, the game flow isn't interrupted either. While multi-layered maps are far fewer than other types, a popular layout is the Shinonuma style map, that being a center hub building or area with multiple forking paths to dead ends. And while Shinonuma was very unique for its time, many maps have come since that have used the concept of its layout. And I wish to discuss two of them, and explain the reality of why the placement of fast travels in maps like this matters. Shadows of Evil is a very popular map, some regard it as one of the best. But why don't I put it on the same pedestal everyone else seems to? Shadows' layout never worked for me. But why is that? Now Shadows may seem to have the same Shinonuma type structure to it, but not entirely. You see, you don't actually spawn in the center, really. The spawn itself is more out of the way of the area. It does have a decent loop that quickly lets you drop down right into the hub area, but the issue here, and with the rest of the map, is the pathways themselves. They are so incredibly tight. Every single hallway that leads to the different districts are so narrow. They give barely any room to move when the zombies are spawning ahead of you. And this is a problem and will happen because of the overlapping nature of the map. Because each of the 3 districts have higher levels where the perks reside. If the player goes up to these levels and drops down or goes back the other way, zombies are always going to spawn ahead of them. And once again, because of the tight, narrow hallways, the player can and will become trapped. But here's where the fast travels come in to save the day, as each district has one. No, not really. You see, when a player is being chased or having zombies spawn ahead of them, it pushes them farther into each district. And 2 of these have areas that are essentially dead ends. The issue is that the fast travels aren't at the end of the paths. They are halfway into them, tucked away in corners. And not to mention, these areas have spawns right next to them, so the player can also get trapped here too. And having to backtrack into a narrow hallway to try to get to the teleporter leads to, you guessed it, being trapped in the tight hallways. Why? Why is the map layout so narrow? And why are the fast travels placed randomly halfway into the districts and not at the ritual rooms where they'd be more useful? The tram also doesn't help as much as you'd think because it can only rest at one single spot at a time. Furthermore, the path leading to it is also extremely small and will lead you to getting trapped even if it is at the location you want. The map flow on Shadows is okay, but the game flow, because of how narrow the map is awful. This right here is the example of why the Shinonuma layout doesn't always work out. But there is a map that uses it well, and that map is one of my personal favorites. Dead of the Night. Dead of the Night has the Shinonuma layout concept, but you not only actually spawn in the center, but the mansion is much more spacious and easier to train in. And here is where the important change is made. Each of the 3 pathways leading outside, even the Pack-a-Punch, all have a fast travel at the end of them. And they are again at the very end of the pathway. So when the player goes down each path to get their perk or upgrade, the teleporters are placed perfectly to send the player right back to the center of the mansion. This is how you do this layout justice. You can't have narrow, complex paths with poor means of navigation. That leads to bad game flow. There even exists a teleporter that takes you to the Pack-a-Punch. As you can see, there are so many parallels that exists in zombies. So many maps, big and small, that are made better or worse with the smallest features. This is why flow is such an important thing to me. It's always important to understand why something does or doesn't work. Because even maps that don't seem to be as creative as others can be made better by how fun they are to play or run around on. It is possible to like or even love a map with bad game or map flow, as there are still things like Easter eggs, wonder weapons, bosses. There are so many elements that make up a zombies map.